The sky was burning. Flames stretched across the horizon as massive alien warships loomed over Earth, their dark metallic hulls gleaming under the dying sun. Humanity had fought for years, resisting with everything they had. But the end was here. The Sci-Fi Empire, a race of brutal conquerors, had unleashed their full might upon the last human stronghold. Commander Rain Carter stood inside the war room of the UEF Aegis, one of Earth's few remaining battleships, staring at the holographic display. Red markers, enemy ships, outnumbered the blue ones 100 to 1. Every second, the blue markers vanished, flickering out like dying stars. "Commander, the orbital defense grid is down," a panicked officer shouted. "The Zephyr are launching their final wave." Carter clenched his fists. This was it. There was no miracle coming, no reinforcements, no secret weapon. Earth was alone. Across the communications channel, scattered voices of fleet captains crackled through, some issuing final orders, others screaming as their ships were torn apart. Above the planet, Zephyr dreadnoughts positioned themselves in high orbit. From their underbellies, massive plasma projectiles detached, glowing bright as they descended toward Earth's surface. Within moments, the first impact struck. Cities were erased in an instant, leaving behind nothing but scorched craters. Millions perished in the blink of an eye. The enemy wasn't just conquering, they were exterminating. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Zephyr Supreme Leader," said the communications officer, his voice hollow. Carter exhaled sharply. "Put it through." The hologram flickered, and then, standing before them, was the Supreme Leader of the Zephyr. Tall, clad in golden battle armor, his pale reptilian skin almost glowing under the dim lights. His expression was one of amusement, his sharp teeth visible in a mocking grin. "Humans, your struggle is pathetic. You fight like cornered animals, lashing out, refusing to accept the inevitable. But this is over. Your kind is nothing but a relic of the past. It is time you are erased." Carter met his gaze, unwavering. "You think wiping out a planet makes you strong?" he asked. "You think we'll just vanish?" The Zephyr leader chuckled, shaking his head. "You still don't understand, do you? We are not just winning a war. We are making sure humanity never exists again." The transmission cut out. Then, the Zephyr fleet unleashed their full firepower. The Aegis trembled as explosions rocked its hull. Outside, Earth's fleet was being torn apart. Battleships detonated in massive fireballs, their debris scattering through space like shattered glass. Fighter pilots screamed over the comms before their signals cut to static. The last few human warships, realizing the battle was lost, turned their engines toward deep space, fleeing into the unknown. "Sir, our shields are failing." "Divert all power to the engines," Carter ordered. "Get us out of here." The Aegis fired its thrusters, dodging between wreckage and plasma blasts. On the view screen, Carter saw the end of everything he had ever known. Earth, his home, was covered in flames. Zephyr ground forces swarmed across the land, slaughtering anyone who remained. The planet's oceans boiled, its great cities reduced to glowing embers. Then the final blow came. A Zephyr superweapon, a station-sized warship, aimed its main cannon at the planet. A massive energy beam lanced down, cutting deep into the Earth's crust. Within moments, massive fissures spread across the planet, consuming entire continents. Then, in a final act of brutality, the core of the planet destabilized. Earth cracked open. There was no time to mourn. The Aegis, along with a few remaining human ships, activated their cloaking drives and vanished into the void. The Zephyr didn't chase them. Why would they? In their eyes, humanity was dead. As Carter looked at the empty space where Earth once stood, he made a silent promise. They thought they had wiped out humanity. They were wrong. The void of space was silent, vast, and endless. In the cold darkness, the last remnants of humanity drifted, hidden from the eyes of their enemies. The Sci-Fi Empire believed them to be extinct, erased from history like so many others before them. But they were wrong. Humanity had not died. It had merely gone into the shadows, waiting for the right moment to rise again. Commander Rain Carter sat in the dimly lit command chamber of the UEF Aegis, staring at the holographic map before him. It had been years since Earth was destroyed, years since the human race had become nothing more than whispers in the void. The Zyphar had moved on, turning their focus toward other conquests, unaware that the survivors were still alive, rebuilding in secrecy. The survivors had found refuge in a dead system, far from Zyphar-controlled space. The system was nothing special. An old dying star surrounded by frozen planets and drifting debris. There was no reason for anyone to come here, no resources worth harvesting, no civilizations worth conquering. And that was exactly why it was perfect. Nestled within the thick clouds of a massive gas giant, hidden beneath layers of radiation storms and magnetic interference, humanity had built its last hope. Revenant Station. It was a massive, self-sustaining structure, constructed from the remains of Earth's fleet and scavenged technology. Inside, the survivors had poured their efforts into a single purpose, preparing for the day they would strike back. The station housed the remnants of humanity's greatest minds. Scientists, engineers, and strategists worked tirelessly, developing new weapons, testing new technologies, and building the fleet that would one day reclaim what was lost. They had no luxury of time. The Zyphar ruled the galaxy with an iron grip, and if humanity was ever to have a future, they needed to act soon. Carter walked through the corridors of the station, watching as teams of workers moved with purpose. In one section, engineers were assembling the next generation of warships, sleek, agile, and armed with experimental cloaking technology. Unlike the outdated vessels of the old Earth fleet, these ships were designed for one thing: to strike from the shadows and disappear before the enemy knew what had hit them. In another chamber, AI specialists worked on the intelligence systems that would control the drones and automated defenses. Humanity was outnumbered, and they knew they could never match the Zyphar in sheer firepower. But they didn't need to. They only needed to be smarter, faster, and more ruthless than their enemies. Carter entered the command center, where Admiral Sloan, one of the few remaining high-ranking officers, was monitoring fleet readiness. She looked up as he approached, her expression grim but determined. "We're almost there," she said. "The first wave of Revenant-class ships will be ready within the next month. We've also made progress on the Phantom drones. Our stealth tech is holding up in simulations." Carter nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. "And the pilots?" "Trained, hardened, and ready to fight," Sloan replied. "They lost everything. They have nothing left but this war." That was the truth. Every soldier in their fleet had suffered, had watched their families burn, had seen their homeworld turn to ash. They weren't fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for vengeance. A sudden alarm blared through the station. Carter turned sharply toward the nearest console. "What is it?" A young officer checked the readings, his face pale. "Unidentified vessel entering the system. It's small, but it's Zyphar." The command center tensed. A Zyphar scout. If they detected the station, if they sent a signal back to their empire, all of humanity's work would be for nothing. The Zyphar would return in force, and this time, there would be no escape. Carter acted instantly. "Scramble Ghost Squadron. That ship cannot leave this system." Within moments, the hangar bay of Revenant Station came alive. Sleek black fighters launched into the darkness, their engines silent, their forms invisible to the naked eye. They moved like shadows, closing in on the enemy vessel before it could react. The Zyphar scout realized too late. It attempted to turn, to flee, but a single well-placed ion shot disabled its engines. The ghost pilots moved in, boarding the vessel with precision. Minutes later, the transmission came through. "Target neutralized. No distress signal sent. We're bringing the pilot in for interrogation." Carter exhaled slowly. They had avoided disaster. But this was a warning. The Zephyr weren't looking for them yet, but they would be soon. The galaxy was getting smaller, and hiding forever was not an option. Admiral Sloane stepped beside him. It won't be long before they come sniffing around again. No, Carter agreed. He looked out at the void, at the half-built fleet taking shape around the station. That's why we need to strike first. Sloane gave a sharp nod. Then it's time. We've spent years preparing. We have the technology, the weapons, and the soldiers. The only thing left is to make our move. Carter turned back to the holographic display. The Zephyr Empire stretched across the stars, vast and seemingly invincible. But they had made one mistake. They had assumed humanity was gone. A slow, determined smile crossed his face. Let's remind them who we are. The plan was simple, but the execution had to be perfect. Humanity couldn't afford a mistake. If the Zephyr realized that the survivors had rebuilt, if they suspected even for a second that humanity was still alive, they would send their full might to wipe them out for good. That couldn't happen. This first attack had to be flawless. It had to be fast, silent, and terrifying. The Zephyr needed to believe that ghosts had come for them. Commander Rain Carter stood on the bridge of the Revenant, the flagship of their hidden fleet. Around him, his crew worked quietly, their faces lit by the soft glow of the ship's interface screens. The tension in the air was thick. They were about to take the first real step toward vengeance. This wasn't a battle for survival anymore. This was a hunt. In front of him, the holographic display showed the target, a Zephyr patrol fleet stationed near the ruins of a once thriving human colony world. A dozen Zephyr warships patrolling an empty graveyard. They had no idea that the ghosts of the past were watching. Carter turned to his communications officer. Send the signal. Across the dark expanse of space, a distress beacon activated. It was an old Earth military frequency, one that hadn't been used in years. A desperate message played on a loop, static-filled and broken, designed to sound like the final plea of a lost human ship. The Zephyr responded almost immediately. On the holographic display, the enemy ships shifted their formation, moving toward the source of the signal. It was exactly as Carter had predicted. The Zephyr had wiped out humanity so easily that they never even considered the possibility of survivors. A distress signal was nothing more than a curiosity to them, a flickering ember of a fire they had long since extinguished. Aboard the Zephyr command ship, the alien captain watched the readings with mild amusement. The signal was weak, bouncing between asteroids in a nearby debris field. Perhaps some broken wreckage from the war had reactivated, or maybe a forgotten drone was still sending signals into the void. Whatever it was, it posed no threat. Still, protocol demanded investigation. Send 2 corvettes to scan the area, the captain ordered. If it's nothing, destroy it and return to formation. 2 Zephyr ships broke away from the fleet, gliding toward the asteroid belt. Their scanners swept the area, searching for anything unusual. But there was nothing, just floating rock and the cold silence of space. Then, the shadows moved. Out of the darkness, cloaked human warships emerged. Black, sleek, and built for ambush, they struck with brutal precision. The first Zephyr corvette never had a chance. Its engines were shredded by high-velocity railgun fire before it could react. The second ship tried to turn, to send a warning to the fleet, but a torpedo found its mark, ripping through the hull in a silent explosion. The Zephyr fleet didn't realize what had happened until it was too late. On the Revenant's bridge, Carter watched as the Zephyr's confusion turned into panic. Their fleet scrambled, trying to understand where the attack had come from. Their sensors detected nothing. There was no enemy fleet, no army, no visible warships, just the endless void and the whisper of death. The Zephyr captain barked orders, demanding a status report, but the only response he got was silence. Then, a new signal appeared on their scanners. It wasn't another distress call this time. It was a message. We are still here. Before the Zephyr could process the meaning of those words, the real attack began. From the asteroid belt, human stealth bombers decloaked and fired. Swarms of torpedoes, moving too fast for Zephyr defenses to react, tore through their ships. Explosions lit up the void as Zephyr vessels were ripped apart, their hulls splitting open like fragile glass. Human warships emerged from the darkness, moving like phantoms, attacking from angles the Zephyr couldn't predict. On the Zephyr command ship, chaos erupted. Officers shouted conflicting orders, their usual arrogance replaced with fear. They had fought humans before, but not like this. Not as ghosts, striking from nowhere, vanishing before they could retaliate. The Zephyr captain made a decision. Send a distress signal to High Command. We need reinforcements. But nothing happened. The moment the first Zephyr ships had fallen, human cyber warfare teams had taken control of their communication systems. The Zephyr were deaf and blind, cut off from their empire. They were alone. Carter gave the final order. End this. The Revenant's main cannon charge, energy crackling along its sleek frame. With a single blast, the Zephyr command ship was obliterated, a brilliant explosion tearing it apart from within. The remaining Zephyr vessels tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. One by one, they were picked off, hunted like prey. Within minutes, the entire fleet was gone. The battlefield was silent once more. Human ships hovered among the wreckage, scanning for survivors. There were none. The Zephyr had been wiped out. On the bridge of the Revenant, Carter exhaled. They had won. The first strike had been a success. But this was just the beginning. Admiral Sloan stepped beside him. What now? Carter looked at the debris, at the remnants of their enemies floating lifeless in the void. He thought about Earth, about the billions who had been slaughtered without mercy. This was justice, but it wasn't enough. We send a survivor, he said. Sloan raised an eyebrow. A survivor? Carter nodded. One Zephyr. We let them escape. Let them go back to their empire. Let them spread the fear. Sloan smiled, understanding. Make them believe in ghosts. The last remaining Zephyr pilot was taken from the wreckage, his terrified eyes scanning the human soldiers who surrounded him. He expected to be killed. Instead, he was placed in a small vessel and set adrift toward Zephyr-controlled space. As the human fleet vanished once more into the void, their message was clear. Humanity was not extinct, and the war had just begun. The Zephyr Empire did not take humiliation lightly. When the lone survivor of their patrol fleet arrived at a Zephyr War outpost, battered and barely coherent, the Empire listened. The soldier's voice trembled as he described the impossible. A fleet that should not exist, a human presence that should have been wiped out. At first, the Zephyr commanders scoffed. Humans were extinct. They had seen Earth burn with their own eyes. No fleet, no technology, no survivors could have possibly remained. And yet, the wreckage of their patrol fleet told a different story. They analyzed the destruction, reviewed the data, and saw the terrifying truth. The weapons used were not of any known faction. The attacks had been precise, their defenses had been completely bypassed, and their communication systems had been hacked in an instant. This was not the desperate struggle of a dying race. This was something else. The Zephyr Supreme Council convened in secrecy, anger and fear clouding their judgment. They could not allow a rebellion to fester. If humanity had survived, even in small numbers, they needed to be crushed before they became a real threat. Within days, a fleet was mobilized, 50 warships, led by one of the Zephyr's most ruthless commanders, High Lord Vakar. His orders were clear: eliminate the ghosts of humanity. Rain Carter watched from the bridge of the Revenant as the Zephyr fleet moved into position. Everything had gone according to plan. The bait had been set, and the Zephyr had taken it, marching straight into the trap. Revenant Station, hidden deep within the gas giant's atmosphere, remained cloaked and undetectable. The human fleet, positioned in the asteroid belt beyond, lay in wait. They had no illusions about their odds. 50 Zephyr warships against barely 20 human vessels. But numbers weren't everything. Carter turned to his officers. Phase 1. Let's welcome them properly. Deep in the asteroid field, automated drones activated. Small, nimble, and fast, they zipped through the debris, releasing waves of electromagnetic interference. Within seconds, Zypher sensors became useless. Their long-range scanners filled with false readings, their ships struggled to maintain formation, and communication channels crackled with static. Vekar, standing aboard the Zephyr command ship, snarled in frustration. Find the source of the interference and destroy it. His officers worked quickly, sending out scout ships to locate the disturbance. But as soon as those ships drifted too far from the fleet, they disappeared. Silent explosions lit up the void as hidden human vessels, cloaked in darkness, picked them off one by one. The Zyphar fleet moved deeper into the asteroid field, their frustration turning into impatience. Vickar believed they were hunting down a desperate enemy, one too weak to face them directly. He had no idea that he was the prey. Carter watched as the Zyphar tightened their formation. That was his signal. Phase 2. Release the Phantoms. From the shadows, the Ghost Squadron emerged. These were humanity's deadliest pilots, trained in ambush tactics, flying ships equipped with advanced cloaking technology. They struck like lightning, their railguns and torpedoes tearing through the Zyphar ranks before vanishing again. Vecker barely had time to react before 3 of his destroyers exploded, torn apart by invisible attackers. The Zyphar fired wildly into the darkness, but there was nothing to hit. Their weapons struck only empty space. Panic spread through the Zyphar ranks. The battle was slipping from their control. They had come expecting a weak, desperate enemy, but they had walked into a war machine built for vengeance. Vekkar's eyes burned with fury. Enough of this. Full power to the main cannons. We will burn this entire asteroid field to dust if we must. The Zyphar ships began charging their main weapons. Carter expected this. They needed to act now. Phase 3, he ordered. From the surface of a nearby asteroid, massive railgun turrets activated. These had been placed in advance, hidden beneath layers of rock, waiting for the perfect moment. Now, they unleashed their firepower. High-velocity projectiles shot through the vacuum, tearing through Zyphar shields and armor. The enemy fleet was in chaos. Their formation collapsed as ship after ship was destroyed. The battlefield was filled with wreckage, floating bodies, and burning metal. Still, the Zyphar fought back. Their remaining ships fired blindly, trying to force the humans out of hiding. Their capital ship, the Harbinger, unleashed a massive energy blast, obliterating 3 human vessels in an instant. Carter gritted his teeth. They were winning, but it wasn't over yet. The Harbinger was the key. If they took it down, the rest of the Zyphar fleet would break. He turned to Admiral Sloan. Target the Harbinger's engines. We need to end this now. Sloan relayed the order, and the Revenant moved in. Its cloaking field flickered as it approached the enemy capital ship, weaving through debris and fire. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, it decloaked right behind the Harbinger. Vekkar's eyes widened in shock. Impossible. The Revenant opened fire. Railguns ripped into the Harbinger's engines, sending flames and debris spewing into space. The massive ship lurched, its systems failing, its power fading. Carter gave the final command. Fire the plasma lance. A glowing beam of energy shot from the Revenant, cutting through the Harbinger's hull like a hot knife through metal. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then the Harbinger detonated in a massive explosion, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The remaining Zyphar ships hesitated. Their leader was dead, their flagship destroyed, and their sensors were still useless. Fear took hold. One by one, they turned and fled. The battle was over. Carter exhaled slowly as he surveyed the battlefield. Wreckage floated in every direction, remnants of the greatest victory humanity had seen since the fall of Earth. Sloan stepped beside him. We did it. Carter nodded. This was just the beginning. Across the galaxy, The Sci-Fi Empire would learn what had happened here. They would come back, stronger, angrier, ready to crush humanity once and for all. But now, the war had changed. For the first time, the Sci-Fi were afraid. The Sci-Fi Empire had made a mistake. They had thought humanity was weak, that their victory was absolute. They had burned Earth, slaughtered billions, and erased humanity from the stars. But they had not destroyed them. Now the ghosts of humanity had returned, and this time they would not be the hunted. They would be the storm. Commander Rain Carter stood in the command center of Revenant Station, watching as reports flooded in. The Battle of the Asteroid Field had been a resounding victory. The Sci-Fi fleet had been shattered, their flagship destroyed, their forces routed. But this was not enough. Victory was not survival. It was time for retribution. Admiral Sloan stood beside him, arms crossed. The Zephyr will respond. They won't just send another fleet. They'll send an armée. Carter nodded. Let them. They still believe we are just remnants, hiding in the dark. That will be their downfall. The plan was already in motion. Humanity could not afford to fight the Zephyr in open war. Not yet. The Empire controlled thousands of systems, fleets beyond counting. If the humans fought conventionally, they would be overwhelmed. So they would not fight conventionally. They would strike at the Empire's heart. The first target was the Zephyr Forward Command Station, located in the Eridanus system. It was a crucial outpost, coordinating Zephyr fleet movements across dozens of star systems. If humanity could take it down, the Zephyr's response to the rebellion would be crippled. Carter turned to his fleet commanders. We strike hard. We strike fast. And when we leave, the Zephyr will know fear. The fleet moved out. Stealth ships, equipped with humanity's finest cloaking technology, slipped through Zephyr defenses unseen. Elite operatives, trained in zero-gravity combat, infiltrated the station's outer layers. In the void of space, human warships waited, their weapons primed. Then the attack began. Explosions erupted along the station's hull as human operatives breached its defenses. Alarms blared inside as Zephyr soldiers scrambled to respond, but it was already too late. The infiltrators moved through the station like shadows, planting charges, disabling security systems, hacking into the Zephyr network. In orbit, the human fleet struck. Railguns and torpedoes rained down on Zephyr defenses, shredding their automated turrets before they could react. The Zephyr's first line of warships, caught off guard, barely had time to raise shields before they were torn apart. Inside the station, Commander Voss, leading the ground assault, relayed the final command. Charges are set. We have 5 minutes. Carter's voice came through the comms. Get out of there. As the operatives retreated to their extraction points, Zephyr reinforcements arrived. Dozens of warships surged into the system, weapons charging. The human fleet had expected this. They had already begun their withdrawal, their ships vanishing into the void. Then, the station exploded. The blast consumed everything in its path. Zephyr ships, defense platforms, and hundreds of thousands of enemy personnel. The Empire's command hub was gone, reduced to burning debris. The Zephyr fleet, thrown into chaos, struggled to regroup. The humans were already gone. Across the galaxy, the attacks continued. Zephyr supply lines were cut, their shipyards sabotaged, their colonies raided. No planet, no outpost, no fleet was safe. The Empire, for the first time in its history, was on the defensive. They had thought humanity was weak. Now, they knew the truth. Humanity was wrath. And they were just getting started. The war had changed. What had started as a desperate struggle for survival had transformed into something greater. Humanity was no longer just fighting to live. They were fighting to win. They were fighting for vengeance. And the Zephyr Empire, once so sure of their dominance, was beginning to understand the true cost of their arrogance. Admiral Vaker stood aboard his warship, staring at the burning wreckage of another lost fleet. His forces had been sent to crush the human rebellion. Yet time and time again, they had been outmaneuvered, ambushed, and destroyed. It made no sense. The humans had no empire, no great armada, no industrial machine to match Zephyr might. And yet, they had become an unstoppable force. "They fight like shadows," one of his officers muttered. "We cannot predict their attacks. We cannot find them until it is too late." Vicar clenched his fists. This was not how it was supposed to be. Humanity was supposed to be gone, extinct. But they were here, striking at the very heart of the Empire, dismantling its fleets, cutting off its supply lines. Worst of all, the fear was spreading. Other species, once too afraid to resist the Sci-Fi, were beginning to take notice. Something had to be done. From the bridge of the Revenant, Commander Rain Carter watched as the final phase of their campaign unfolded. Their greatest gamble was about to begin. The humans had spent months crippling the Sci-Fi's war machine, taking away their ability to respond with overwhelming force. Now, it was time to deliver the final message. Their target, the Sci-Fi homeworld. It was an impossible mission. No human fleet could ever hope to conquer the Sci-Fi capital. It was surrounded by the Empire's strongest defenses, protected by thousands of warships. A direct assault was suicide. So they would not attack it directly. They would break the Sci-Fi from within. Carter's voice was steady as he addressed his crew. "For years, the Zephyr have hunted us, believing they wiped us out. They wanted us to be nothing more than a memory. But they made a mistake. They left survivors. They left us. And now we make sure they never forget." The plan was in motion. A fleet of cloaked human ships moved into position just outside the Zephyr home system. Meanwhile, deep inside the Empire, sleeper agents, Zephyr civilians who had grown disillusioned with their own rulers, activated the final phase of the operation. The Zephyr had always controlled the narrative. They told their people that humanity was gone, that there was no war, only the last remnants of a defeated enemy. But now, the truth would be revealed. Across the Empire, thousands of intercepted transmissions, classified reports, and battle footage of Zephyr defeats were released to the public. Every Zephyr world, every colony, every station saw the truth. Humanity was alive. The Empire had been losing battle after battle, unable to stop an enemy they thought was dead. And then, the final message played. On every Zephyr screen, a face appeared. Not a Zephyr, but a human. Rain Carter. "You thought you destroyed us," he said, his voice calm but filled with fire. "You thought humanity was nothing but dust beneath your boots. But we are still here. And we are not afraid." Zephyr citizens, who had lived their entire lives believing their empire was invincible, watched in horror as images of destroyed Zephyr fleets, burning colonies, and shattered warships played before them. "You wanted to erase us from history," Carter continued. "But history does not forget. And neither do we." Panic erupted across the Zephyr homeworld. Protests turned into riots. The people demanded answers. The Empire's grip on its own citizens weakened as the truth spread like wildfire. And then, the final blow. A single human warship decloaked in orbit above the Zephyr capital. It was not there to attack. It was there to send a message. It transmitted a single file. Detailed blueprints of the Zephyr's own military weaknesses, corruption in their government, proof that their leaders had lied to them for centuries. The Empire, so sure of its power, was rotting from within. The Zephyr had once believed themselves gods. Now, they saw the truth. They were not unbreakable. They were not untouchable. And humanity was coming for them. As the human fleet vanished once more into the void, the war had reached its turning point. The Empire would never be the same. The ghosts of humanity had returned. And the galaxy would never forget their name.